These are 8 secret engine options dealers were told to hide. Number 8, 1969, Mercury Cyclone 428 Cobra Jet Spoiler 2. Mercury wasn't usually the name that came up when people talked about serious performance in 1969. That was the point. The Cyclone Spoiler 2 was Mercury's direct response to what Dodge was doing with the Daytona and what Plymouth was about to do with the Superbird. NASCAR's superspeedways were being won by aerodynamics, and Ford's racing division knew it. The Spoiler 2 got an extended nose and roofline modifications that were pure wind tunnel engineering, not styling, not marketing, not a trim package. Real aerodynamic work borrowed directly from the race program. Under the hood, the weapon of choice was the 428 Cobra Jet V8. Mercury officially rated it at 335 horsepower and 440 pound-feet of torque. The real number was somewhere between 400 and 430 horsepower. Ford and Mercury were among the most aggressive underraters of the entire era. They understood that published numbers invited scrutiny, and scrutiny invited problems. Stock, the Spoiler 2 would do 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds and run the quarter mile in 13.5 seconds at 106 miles per hour. Here's where the secrecy comes in. Mercury dealers in markets with no connection to NASCAR racing received these cars and genuinely didn't know what they had. Many sold them as performance versions of the standard Cyclone without understanding the engine's real output or the car's aerodynamic purpose. The special editions, one named for Cale Yarborough, one for Dan Gurney, were produced in tiny numbers and arrived at dealerships without any explanation of their historical significance. Only 519 Spoiler 2s were built total. Every surviving example is a serious collector car today, with the Yarborough and Gurney editions pushing significantly above the standard $80,000 to $180,000 range. Most of the dealers who received them had no idea they were handling something that would matter this much 50 years later. Number 7, 1970, Plymouth Barracuda AAR. The name AAR stood for All American Racers, Dan Gurney's racing operation. That alone tells you what this car was really about. Plymouth built the AAR Barracuda as their homologation car for the SCCA Trans Am Racing Series. The rules were simple and unforgiving. If you wanted to race it, you had to sell it. A street-legal production version had to exist and had to be available to the public. So Plymouth built one. What they put on that street car was an engine configuration that had no business being advertised to ordinary buyers. 3 two-barrel Holley carburetors on top of a 340 cubic inch V8, triple carbs on a small block, a setup associated almost exclusively with race engines. Plymouth officially rated it at 290 horsepower and 345 pound-feet of torque. The actual output was closer to 350 to 380 horsepower. The official number was a legal fiction. The rest of the car matched the intent. Side exit exhaust, fiberglass hood with a functional scoop, front air dam pulled directly from the racing program. None of this was subtle to anyone who understood what they were looking at. But that was the problem. Most people didn't. Plymouth never advertised the AAR engine option in mainstream literature. Dealers in areas far from the Trans Am racing world received these cars with no guidance, no training, and no real understanding of what the triple carb setup represented. Many had never seen anything like it. Clean documented AAR Barracudas today sell between $80,000 and $160,000. The most desirable colors and configurations push beyond that. A car that Plymouth barely told its own dealers about has become one of the most sought-after Barracudas ever built. Number 6. Ford Fairlane 427 Lightweight. Regular Ford dealerships never saw one of these, and if they had, they wouldn't have known what to do with it. Ford built the 427 Lightweight Fairlane for one purpose: to dominate NHRA superstock drag racing, not to compete, to dominate. The approach was methodical and uncompromising. Fiberglass hood, fiberglass front fenders, fiberglass bumpers, virtually every comfort feature stripped from the interior. Weight was the enemy, and Ford attacked it from every direction. Under the hood sat the 427 cubic inch V8 in high riser configuration, 425 horsepower and 480 pound-feet of torque in street tune, with the most aggressive race setups pushing well beyond 500. The high riser intake was so physically large that the hood had to be modified just to clear it. This wasn't an engine you ordered because you wanted a quick commute. It was a racing power plant that happened to have enough street equipment around it to carry a VIN number. On the drag strip, it ran the quarter mile in around 12.5 seconds at 114 miles per hour in basic trim. In 1966, with a factory warranty, Ford distributed these cars through a carefully selected network of performance-oriented dealers who were specifically briefed on what they were receiving and who they should be selling to. Regular dealerships were never part of that network and never part of that conversation. If one had accidentally received a 427 Lightweight, it would have sat on the lot until someone explained to the sales staff what the order sheet actually meant. 57 were built. Documented examples today bring between $200,000 and $400,000 at auction. 57 cars, built to win drag races, sold quietly through dealers who understood the assignment. Number 5. The 1969 Dodge Dart 426 Hemi. Fitting a 426 Hemi into a Dodge Dart was not a straightforward task. The Dart was a compact car. The Hemi was a massive iron block, race-developed engine originally designed for full-size cars and NASCAR superspeedways. Putting one inside the other required Chrysler to modify the inner fenders, relocate the battery to the trunk, and make significant structural changes throughout the engine bay. This wasn't a parts bin exercise. It was targeted engineering with a specific mission. That mission was drag racing. Chrysler built these cars at the direct request of racer and dealer Herb McCandless and a small group of others connected to the drag racing world through Chrysler's Direct Connection program. The approach was the same one that produced the most extreme muscle cars of the era. Identify the serious racers, build what they need, distribute through the dealers who serve them, and keep everything as quiet as possible. The result? Acid-dipped body panels to reduce weight, lightweight front fenders, no rear seat in many cars, no radio, no sound deadening, and a 426 Hemi producing 425 horsepower and 490 torque in street tune, with race-prepared versions running the quarter mile at over 130 miles per hour. Street-configured examples ran closer to 12-second quarters. Either way, in a compact dart body, the effect was violent. Original price was approximately $4,500 to $5,000 depending on configuration, but buying one wasn't about having the money. It was about knowing the right person at the right dealership. These cars were not offered publicly. They were not advertised. They were distributed through a network so small and so specific that most Dodge dealers across the country never knew they existed. Documented Hemi Darts today sell between $250,000 and $500,000 at auction, with the most original and race-documented examples going higher. You couldn't just walk into a Dodge dealership and order one. You had to already be inside the circle. Number 4. 1969 Chevrolet Camaro COPO 9561. General Motors had a corporate rule: No engine larger than 400 cubic inches in a mid-size or pony car. The reasoning was liability. The insurance industry was watching. Regulators were watching. GM's own legal team was watching. A 427 cubic inch engine in a Camaro was exactly the kind of thing that drew exactly the kind of attention GM wanted to avoid, so it shouldn't have been possible. And yet, a Chevrolet dealer from Illinois named Fred Gibb figured out a way to make it happen anyway. The COPO system, Central Office Production Order, was a back-channel ordering process designed for fleet and commercial vehicle special requests, municipalities ordering police cars, companies ordering work trucks, that kind of thing. It existed outside the normal retail ordering process, which meant it also existed outside the normal corporate restrictions. Fred Gibb, working directly with Vince Piggins inside Chevrolet's performance division, used COPO order code 9561 to route an iron block 427 cubic inch V8 into the Camaro. The engine produced 425 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque, honestly. No sandbagging, no underrating. It was a brutally direct race engine in a street car body. Quarter-mile times in stock form came in at 13.2 seconds at 115 miles per hour. With basic preparation, these cars were deep into the 12 seconds. Chevrolet officially had no knowledge of this. That was the arrangement. The COPO system created enough distance between the corporate policy and the actual transaction that everyone could maintain their position. Dealers who participated ordered quietly, sold quietly, said nothing publicly about what the order code meant or what was under the hood. COPO 9561 Camaros today sell between $150,000 and $300,000 depending on documentation and condition. The rule said no 427 in a Camaro. The COPO system said otherwise, and 1,015 people got the car GM officially wasn't supposed to build. Number 3, 1964 Pontiac Catalina Superduty 421. Pontiac had been running the Superduty program since the early 1960s. By any honest description, it was a barely disguised factory racing operation, and the people inside Pontiac knew it. The Superduty 421 engine featured a cross-ram intake manifold with dual 4-barrel carburetors, a McKellar solid lifter camshaft, and strengthened internals throughout. Pontiac's own engineers described it internally as a racing engine with street credentials, not the other way around. In its most aggressive form, it was putting out 405 horsepower officially, and somewhere between 450 and 470 in reality. The quarter mile came in at the very low 12-second range at around 116 miles per hour. Those were numbers that embarrassed purpose-built drag cars from other manufacturers. Ordering one was not a straightforward retail transaction. These were handled through back channels at specific dealerships rather than through any standard ordering process. Pricing was deliberately vague. The dealers who handled these transactions were chosen carefully. They knew exactly what they were doing and exactly who they were supposed to be doing it for. Then GM issued its corporate ban on factory racing involvement in 1963. The order came down from the top, and Pontiac had no choice but to comply. The Superduty program was quietly discontinued. The 1964 cars were the last of the line, built in the shadow of a corporate policy that was already shutting the program down, distributed through the same quiet dealer network that had always handled them. Today, documented Superduty Catalinas sell between $150,000 and $280,000, with the most powerful configurations commanding the highest prices. The program ended not because the cars stopped working. They were ended because they worked too well, and that had become a problem. Number 2, 1969 Chevrolet Camaro ZL1. Everything that was true about the COPO 9561 was true about the ZL1, and then some. Same back-channel ordering system, same corporate rule being circumvented, same Fred Gibb, same Vince Piggins. But where the 9561 used an iron block 427, the ZL1 used an all-aluminum 427 lifted directly from Chevrolet's Can-Am racing program. The difference in weight was 160 pounds, gone from the front of the car, transforming the handling and balance in the process. The official rating was 430 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque. The real output was 500 to 560 horsepower. Chevrolet was sandbagging aggressively, and they had every reason to. The quarter mile in stock trim came in at the high 11-second range at 120 miles per hour. In 1969, off a showroom floor, unmodified, the price was the story that kept the production numbers small. The ZL1 engine option alone added $4,160 to the base price of a Camaro, bringing the total to around $7,200. The median American family income that year was under $9,000. This wasn't a car for enthusiasts with a little extra money. It was a car for professional drag racers and people of serious means who understood exactly what the aluminum engine represented. Fred Gibb originally ordered 50 of them for his dealership alone. When they arrived at $7,200 each, he couldn't move them. He had to call Chevrolet and ask them to take the unsold cars back. Only 69 were ever built. Every single one is documented and tracked by the ZL1 registry today. Mecum sold a well-documented example for $770,000 in 2021. Current values range between $500,000 and $1 million. 69 cars, the most expensive Camaro ever offered, built through a system that officially didn't exist to produce a car GM officially hadn't approved. Number 1, 1963 Chevrolet Impala Z11. This is the one that Chevrolet pretended didn't exist. Not quietly discouraged, not kept off the main order sheet. Officially, completely, deliberately non-existent. The Z11 was built around a 427 cubic inch V8 that Chevrolet never acknowledged publicly, at a time when the Automobile Manufacturers Association's gentleman's agreement banned factory involvement in racing, and GM had signed on to that agreement. The Z11 was the clearest possible violation of everything that agreement represented. So Chevrolet's approach was straightforward. It didn't exist. There were no advertisements, no brochures, no published specifications, no price list, nothing. What there was: 57 cars built with an aluminum front bumper, aluminum hood, aluminum inner fenders, no heater, no radio, and no sound deadening. Everything that weighed something and wasn't essential to going fast was removed. The car arrived at the dealer with a full race setup and the implicit understanding that this conversation wasn't happening. Dealers were specifically instructed not to advertise it, to discuss it only with customers they already knew were racers, to treat the transaction as something that required no paper trail beyond the minimum legally required. It was as close to an official factory race car with a VIN number as Detroit had ever produced. On paper, Chevrolet said 430 horsepower. Every historian and drag racer who has ever touched one agrees the real number was closer to 500. The quarter mile came in at around 118 miles per hour. In the low 12-second range, completely stock, at a time when those numbers were almost unheard of from a factory car. There was no official price. It was never publicly offered. You had to be a known racer. You had to know the right dealer. You had to be the kind of person that Chevrolet trusted with the secret. Documented Z11 today sell consistently between $300,000 and $500,000. This was a car that Chevrolet built, delivered, and sold, while maintaining at every level of the organization that it had done no such thing. It is the most secretive factory performance car the American muscle car era ever produced. A car that officially never existed, that 57 people somehow drove home.